Greetings. Let's have a discussion. My name is Wala-Neh. I'm a mental health practitioner, a licensed clinical social worker. I work as a therapist, and I'd like to have a discussion on what everyone's talking about. Mass shootings. How do we solve this problem? What is the solution? Does it look like more legislation? Does it look like more training with the police? What does that look like? So before we start, I like to say that I'm not going to be coming from a left or right-leaning position, but I want to look at what makes sense. And obviously I'm coming from my background, my professional background in mental health. So I want to say that I'm not coming from a divisive partisan perspective, but having an open and honest discussion where all ideas have been reviewed to kind of get a sense of what makes sense. So when you're trying to solve a problem, it's good to first define what is that problem. What exactly are you trying to fix or solve? So in terms of this issue of the mass shootings, a mass shooting is defined as an incident where 4 or more people are shot and killed in one incident. So that's the definition that I'm going to use for this video recording. So with that definition of a mass shooting, and when those things happen, there's loss of life, there's trauma, there's tragedy, there's that fear where other people are fearful for their safety, and it terrorizes the whole community, the whole nation, and people are in fear. Children have anxiety, and adults as well. So how do we solve that problem now that we've defined what the problem is? So before we look at some of the solutions to evaluate how effective they may be, I want to look at one of the solutions on the surface and with further scrutiny that does not seem to be a possible solution. So most recently we've been talking about, in the news has been talking about school shootings. Mass shootings can happen anywhere, mall, church, outside at a festival, but schools have been on the news most recently, especially with the incident in Uvalde, Texas. So one possible solution that I was thinking about, because as a mental health practitioner, I had the privilege of talking with many people as a therapist. So I, serve as a therapist for, politicians, some of the lawmakers that, some of the police officers, doctors, individuals who have been released from prison, people who are homeless, people who are teachers, principals, people who are mechanics, just everyone from every spectrum of life. I get the privilege of having a moment to hear their life story, hear their perspectives, hear about their professions, their occupations, their problems, and how they view the world. So it gives me an ability to see things not just from maybe my perspective, but how other people are seeing these things. So that's one value. So I've talked with a lot of teachers, and one solution that is being proposed in terms of solving the issue of mass shootings, which I do not think is helpful based on what I've heard, is the proposed solution of giving teachers guns. So for some people, this may be a possible solution, but let me tell you why it likely is not a good solution. So, giving a teacher a gun, the reason one might do that, I'm believing, is that if an incident happens and a teacher has a gun, the teacher would then take the gun and shoot and disarm, stop, kill the individual with the gun who is shooting or trying to take life in the school. So one reason why it does not seem to be a good option is that it increases the general overall risk in the school. So when you have a gun in the classroom, it has to be stored properly. So is that gun going to be in a locked case, or is the teacher going to have it on their person, whether it's on a holster? If it's in a locked case and something happens, how quickly will the teacher be able to get to it if it's locked? like in a safe or combination lock. If it's not locked, and if it's on their person, that poses a danger because the student could reach and grab the teacher's guns. And if you have so many teachers with guns, that's a huge risk. Another issue with teachers having guns is that you're not just going to give a teacher a gun and say protect your class. You're not going to do that. What you would do is you'll give a teacher a gun after going through training. The teacher would have to go through gun safety training, and they will likely have to go through recertification. Now, I don't know if anyone in your family works in education, but working with teachers as a therapist and principals, and I get to hear from them like everything that's going on, teachers are under a lot of stress. I don't know if you're aware of that, but teachers are under a lot of stress. Many teachers are retiring early, leaving the profession, and I see that from my standpoint on the mental health aspect. And teachers already do a lot. So if you added more training that teachers needed to do to get gun training, more training to get recertification, that takes away time that a teacher would need for the lesson plans, for making sure they're teaching to the test or whatever curriculum standards that they have to do. That's more time and pressure, and that's not really helpful for what teachers need in their mental health. Furthermore, a third thing, which some people are maybe not going to like this, but I'm going to say it because it's the lens through which I view the world. So imagine you give teachers guns and the police are responding because there's a school shooting. And the police show up and teachers have guns and they're all coming out of the classroom with their gun trying to find out who the shooter is. Now imagine the police comes and they see all these adults with guns. How does the police officer know who is the person that they need to stop and who is authorized to have a gun? Now, you might say, well, teachers would have badges to identify themselves. That's a possibility. But in an emergency situation, if a teacher is holding a badge on their waist, if it's flopping, the police officer may not see that item. And it poses a lot of risk and danger. And furthermore, you may have some teachers, and I'm just going to speak for myself, I'm not a teacher, but you might have some individuals who may not fit a certain profile. And police officers may see a certain individual with a gun, and they might all of a sudden say, whoa, that person is the perpetrator because they fit a profile of a perpetrator. And then you might have police officers shooting teachers because they fit a certain profile or they look suspicious, and that puts a lot of teachers at risk. So those are 3 reasons why giving guns to teachers is not a good idea. So now let's look at some other possible solutions. How about legislation? You guys may have remembered Sandy Hook. So after Sandy Hook, that is when a lot of schools started to lock their doors. Individuals had to buzz into schools, and a lot of schools started having resource officers, the sheriff's department to protect the children. Now, as we look at Uvalde, Texas, in terms of what happened at that campus when the active shooter came on the premises, we can say, okay, so is the solution to have school security? Now, I believe that school security is important. However, when we look at the situation in Uvalde, Texas, the current news report saying that school security was not on the premise in that moment. So I think initial reports by the police officer said that the school security engaged the shooter with exchange of gunfire, but that later was dismissed and said by the public safety department that those accounts or those reports were false. So that safeguard should have been in place, or it should have been implemented, but it wasn't being followed. What about metal detectors? What if we give metal detectors to all the schools? Now, in the incident in Uvalde, Texas, where the gunman came in, if a metal detector was there, the metal detector would not have stopped this individual. he or she would have just walked through the metal detector, or he would have just shot at the security guard at the metal detector. And in this incident, the security guard was not on the premises. There was another case, I think the Parkland shooting in Florida? I think it was Parkland in Florida. There was a school security on the premise when the shooting happened. And when the shooting happened, the school security ran away or did not engage the shooter. It seems like they feared for their life. And that's not the first case where you've had the resource officers there, but they don't engage the active shooter. So that also takes us to another possible topic where people talk about, well, regulating guns. So if we have these systems and the school isn't being protected, how about just banning assault weapons? How about banning AR-51s? And I know some people say assault weapons is not a classification of guns, but banning a certain classifications of guns or making it more difficult. Let's have that discussion. So it was noted that during the Clinton era, there was an assault weapons ban, and during that time, the incidences of death by guns was decreased. So you can research that for yourself. That is one thing that I am aware of. But is legislation actually the way to go, and is that going to solve the problem? So let's look at the gun violence. So one argument that some people say is, guns don't kill people, people kill people. Okay. Do the guns make it easier? Yes, the gun makes it easier. Someone says, well, if you don't have guns, if you were to take away everyone's guns, we do have a Second Amendment, but if you take away everyone's guns, people are just going to get knives or they're going to find another way. So let's talk about that. So in terms of guns, so we have a Second Amendment, which every country in the world, or most countries, do not have a Second Amendment. So as you study history, as this nation was formed, there was a Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, the right to establish a well-regulated militia. And the Supreme Court recently has ruled that this right to bear arms is not simply for the militia, the forming of a militia to protect the state, but it's an individual right. So the Supreme Court, which many people disagree with, is stating that this right to bear arms is an individual right, not just for the purpose of having a militia, which means that an individual has the right to own a certain weapon for self-defense. So with that context, what type of legislation could we do perhaps to maybe take guns out of the hands of potential shooters, and is that the way to go? So one thing in terms of gun legislation is background checks. For some places, background checks are in effect. In other places, they're not. In this case, obviously, a background check is only effective if someone has a criminal record. And there are many individuals, I think including the individual in the Uvalde, Texas shooting, and the others, some individuals who do not have a criminal record. So while a background check may catch or flag certain individuals, there'll be other individuals that do not have a criminal record. For example, there are many individuals, most recently in Western Maryland, the state where I reside, where there was a shooting at a workplace location. And I don't believe this individual, I don't know, but the news reports did not share of a criminal background that they had. They did not use a AR-51, they used a pistol, and 3 individuals were killed, a 4th person shot. So as we look at that, so there are some individuals that a background check would stop. However, there are others who would fall through the cracks because they do not yet have a criminal record. And there's another argument that people say is that, well, if you take all the guns away or you have all these strict gun laws, they say that's only going to make it harder for the law-abiding citizens, not for the criminals, because the criminals don't follow laws because that's why they're criminals. For example, someone may note of the fact that the school was a gun-free zone, and that made it harder for people to have guns. But we kind of already talked about how giving teachers guns wouldn't have made that easier. So that's that topic. But I mean, there is something that entertaining in terms of if you have all these gun restrictions, and I don't think citizens, having guns is like the solution. There is something to think about when you think about having more laws to make it harder for someone to get a gun and how effective they will be. So for example, let's look at the situation in Michigan where the student Ethan Crumbley shot some students in his classroom in Michigan. And so, you have all these gun laws and whatnot, and he got the gun from whom? His parents. So I believe his mother bought him the gun for his birthday. So even if his parents didn't have a criminal background, they give their son the gun and he used the gun. So in that situation, the gun laws would not have stopped that shooting. And a background check in the Uvalde, Texas issue probably would not have stopped it. So does that mean that we have no gun laws? We should not have any gun laws? No, I don't think so. I think basic, red flag laws, screening people who have criminal history is important, and some people will be flagged. How many? I don't know. How effective it will be? I don't know. I think it will do something, but I don't think it will solve the problem. So another argument that people say is, don't take away my guns. You want to ban a certain gun. You want to ban this gun. You want to ban that gun. So I heard a good analogy. Someone said, I think the person was a truck driver. They said, I have to haul a big trailer attached to my tractor trailer, to my truck. And for me to haul this trailer, I need a certain class of license. I need to meet certain standards. The trailer has to meet this specifications. I have to be able to show that it does this, A, B, C, check the box, check the box, check the box. And he says, if I don't meet these standards, if I don't follow this protocol, this procedures, I can't haul this big trailer in my vehicle. And then he remarked and said, trailers are not banned. They are regulated. I repeat, he said trailers are not banned. Not anyone. You see tractor trailers all over, on the roads. No one's saying that tractor trailers or trailers are banned, but they are regulated. So the topic with guns, or what to do with guns, or what type of guns to have, or what type of guns to not have, or who can have a certain firearm, I think we should change that topic framework from looking at it as in you're trying to ban guns. I don't think it's about banning guns. It's about how are we regulating, right? Because if we can regulate a tractor trailer or a trailer being pulled by a truck or another vehicle, it makes sense to be able to regulate a firearm that can take a life. So I think we're not talking about banning guns, or the bigger discussion shouldn't be about banning guns. It should be about regulating. How do you regulate that? And what does appropriate regulations look like? Now, let's get to my scope of competency, mental health. So people are saying, well, it's mental health. We need more mental health. We need more mental health to address this issue. People have mental health issues. I think they do. Many people do have mental health issues, and I think there is something. So let's talk about mental health. So one proposed solution is we need more mental health care. And I think mental health is important. So one thing that people are saying is that if someone has maybe certain mental health care issues, they should not be allowed to purchase a firearm. That's something to be entertained by our legislatures and politicians to look into. So what would it look like? So I know some people feel this is a threat to their liberties or their rights, but one way to look at it is we already have systems in place which I think work very well. Domestic violence, right? There are individuals who have pose the risk or danger to others, and someone goes to a court and they say, I need a restraining order and I need to protect myself from this individual because this person seeks to do me harm. And there's been people who have been forced to get a mental health evaluation against their will because of the threat or safety issue they pose to someone else. Has this been misused by individuals who have been malicious or vengeful? Yes, it has. It has. Many times. Has it saved many lives? Yes, it has. And I believe many more. So with any system, there's a potential for it to be misused. So I think it has been misused many times. But however, I think those who have been saved, those who have been protected because of the setup where the court can compel someone to get a mental health evaluation, or the court can tell someone not to be in a certain location where another individual is for their safety, where credible evidence has been presented, I think the benefit outweighs the cons. Kind of like seatbelts, right? When seatbelts first came out, people were saying, or seatbelts are airbags. Airbags have the potential of killing children if you're too close and the airbag goes off, or seatbelts can harm. Yes, they can. And the airbag, the velocity that the bag comes out at is so great that people have died because of that. However, those who have been saved by seatbelts and airbags are a lot more than those who have been injured. So similarly, I think even though there is a potential, obviously there is, for a system to be misused, if a spouse or a girlfriend or a significant other says, this person, I believe, they're planning to blow up a school or shoot up a area where a lot of people congregate, I think the court should take away this person's firearms temporarily. Can that be misused? Yes, it can. Will it probably be able to prevent certain bad things from happening? I believe so as well. That's a discussion to be had, but I think that's something else to look at. In terms of counseling, I think obviously more people do need to focus on their mental health care, seeing the therapist. Oftentimes, unfortunately, when these situations happen, it's unsure. Some of these individuals are not in therapy. So in the situation in Uvalde, Texas, I'm unaware whether or not this individual who went to the school and shot up the school was in therapy. So I'm not sure. And if he was not, are we saying that we want some law if someone's concerned that they can compel someone to be in therapy? Because as a mental health practitioner, I'll tell you that therapy isn't really something that you force on people. Therapy works best when the individual with the problem realizes they have a problem and they want help. As a therapist, I can tell you that trying to do therapy with someone, and all my mental health practitioner colleagues out there, you can raise your hand. Trying to do therapy with someone who does not want to do therapy is not pleasant, it's not fun, and it's often not very productive. So therapy really is for people who want help and they know they have a problem. Now, we can have other avenues, whereas the court are mandating someone has a mental health evaluation, or you can have other things where you have politicians take away the barriers for people who want to get in therapy. So if we want to solve this problem, you could put financial incentives or money for certain people who may make too much money to qualify for state insurance, but they still don't make enough to pay that copay. So we could have politicians putting money towards allocating support for people who want to get their mental health needs, but there are financial barriers. We could have financial incentives or incentives in education to have more trained clinical social workers, psychologists, counselors, psychiatrists, so that mental health portion is stronger. But as I look at this issue, I think at the heart of this is really the family. So these individuals that are doing these acts of violence, typically younger males, that's a demographic that we look at that tend to be doing the shooting, they're often loners. So this individual in the Uvalde, Texas, he was living with his grandmother. Where were the parents? I don't know. Perhaps he came from a broken home. And the incident in Michigan where the student was given the gun by his parents, it seemed like there was a lot of neglect in that. He didn't seem to have a strong relationship with his parents as the parents were giving him guns. And in that situation, there was mental health in the school. A teacher identified that this student was drawing violent pictures. This is in the Michigan situation. And the teacher told the guidance counselor. The guidance counselor told the staff. They had a meeting. The school recommended that the child get evaluated, but the parents declined in that situation. So there was another safeguard in place, but it wasn't followed. So I think relationships are very important. Oftentimes when people are doing these things, they often don't feel connected to their community. They often don't have someone in their life that they feel would be upset. Someone would be upset with me if I did this. Someone would, I would have let down someone if I did this. So I think it's very important that we strengthen family relations. We strengthen relationships in our communities. And this is a difficult way to approach. You can't really legislate, strengthening relationships. You can't legislate people loving each other. But I think that's very important. I think when you look at these situations, it's often someone who feels disconnected. They don't have someone special in their life. They don't feel loved. They don't feel accountable to anyone. Maybe the school system has failed them. Maybe they grew up in a single home where it's only one parent and there's not both parents there nurturing them in terms of what it means to be growing up in a healthy household. So I think we really need to look at the family. We need really, because these individuals are adults that are often perpetrating these cases, or adolescents, but everyone, even an adult, comes up in a family, or they might come up in foster care because the parents were not there. So I think that looking at the family, how can we strengthen the family? How can we have parents be more engaged in the lives of their children? How can we help parents to be more engaged in knowing that the decisions that you make now affect your child who may later become an adult, will later become an adult, and the relationships they have with others, the way they cope with stress when they're stressed out. How do we help children manage their stress in healthy ways? Another thing I think about is marriage. So many children grow up in homes where you have a mother and a father, you have a marriage. There are many children that are being born outside of this family system of marriage, which I know some people are saying, okay, how's that gonna fix the problem or help the solution? But I believe that, so marriage offers stability for children. Children like predictability and stability, and obviously 50% or more of marriages are ending in divorce. But with that said, when you have the stability of two parents, it helps for a stronger environment where children can be nurtured and raised in a healthy dynamic. So obviously there are situations where you have both parents and the child still ends up being someone who turns out being an active shooter. However, research shows that those homes, it seems like the parents are often unengaged, they're neglectful, and maybe they're letting the child be babysat by the video games, by the electronics, instead of spending quality time with their child. So how do we solve this issue of mass shootings? I think it's really on a person-to-person basis in terms of relationships. I think it's all about relationships. As Pastor P.M. Smith in Baltimore, Hebrew Memorial Church says, it's all about relationships or it's not about anything. Imagine someone who goes and takes a gun and shoots a lot of people. What is their relationship to those people? What is the value that they put on the lives of those individuals that they're getting ready to take? They probably feel distant. They probably feel disconnected. They feel the sense that I can take this life and I don't care. They probably feel disconnected from their community. They probably don't have any sense of shame. There's no sense of, if I do this, I'll feel shame, I'll feel guilt. There'll be someone who cares about me that will be disappointed in my actions. So how do we solve this? Do we need to give police more guns and weapons? Well, in the Uvalde, Texas, there were 19 police officers with weapons. Funding for the police was not the issue in Uvalde, Texas. They were funded. Leadership Perhaps implementation was probably the issue. Do we need more security guards in school? Well, in that case, there was a security guard, but he was not on post. Human error failed again. Do we need mental health backgrounds? I think that's helpful, but it's not going to solve the problem because therapy works best with people who want therapy. Do we need to regulate guns? Take away all the firearms? You could do that, and it would maybe put a dent in it, but it wouldn't solve the problem because people would still have the black market with guns, and people will still have handguns, and those could still be used. I think it really boils down to relationships. I think it really boils down to, as a society, do we value relationships? Do we teach people how to cherish relationships, how to respect others, how to love others, and that sense of dignity, knowing that everyone has a value, everyone has a worth. How do we treat other people? And yes, we do need laws, common sense laws to regulate, to have red flags, to flag certain people who shouldn't own a gun. But in the end, to really get to the root of the problem, I think we need to look at the relationships. We need to look at community. So for example, you might be noticing that I'm wearing this pin, right? So I'm not just wearing this pin to be fancy. So this pin is actually a pin that I'm wearing for my chess club. So I teach chess in the community at the local library. One day I went to the library and I said, you know what? I have the skill of playing chess. Let me teach, I would like to teach chess. And they were like, sure, we would love to do that. So I've been teaching chess since 2018, so 4 years now. So after school program, I don't charge any money. But that sense of community, helping children have something active to do, feeling a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, building healthy relationships, doing something positive. Just those little things, mentoring a child, those things really help our community. It helps individuals, and these individuals, these children, are going to grow up to be adults. If you start young, teaching them that someone loves you, someone cares about you, someone cares about your actions, what you do matters to them. I think little things like that, like this chess club that I've been doing for 4 years, or in our community, 12-bit mentors, being a loving role model to an individual, engaged parents, having supportive relationships, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, sports, parents engaged, society, character counts coaches, positive mentors in children's lives. I think that's how we really get to the heart of the issue. Yes, we need security. Yes, we need more help with mental health. And ultimately, I think it comes down to relationships. How do we relate to each other as a society? Are we polite to each other in our politics? Are we civil? Do students witness parents being respectful of each other? Do students witness parents interacting in love? Do we see that in our entertainment, in our movies, in the news? Or do they see chaos? Do they see adults who don't regard relationships with respect? They don't value life. They take a life and there's not much, to it. So there's no easy solutions to the issue of mass shootings, but I think if we really want to get to the heart of it, we really need to look at relationships. How do we relate to people? And when you start looking from that perspective, then it puts everything into a different view, and there's no quick solutions, no quick fixes. But if you start looking at relationships, and if you just start yourself treating others better and serving as that example and loving those around you, that's a good way to start.